This one is on a diet. Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today we take a trip to the Henry Juskowitz era of Gibson and we document one of his creations, the Les Paul Custom Lite. But before we take this thing out of the case, we need to do a little bit of a history lesson so we can understand this model. Before Gibson changed management teams in 2019, the first time the company had new ownership was for the year 1986, where Henry J. and a few other people bought out Gibson from Norland Industries. They kind of flopped around for 4 years trying to figure out how to turn the company around, and they birthed some very interesting models from weird super Strats before they finally struck gold with the Les Paul Classic, and Les Pauls became popular in general. Then we get the custom shop opening in late 1993, and the rest is just history from there. But occasionally they made some pretty cool models, one of them being the Custom Lite. So these were first prototyped in late 1986, but they came out for the 1987 model year, and they lasted until about 1989. Might you find a very early 1990? Possibly. But you're probably just saying, hey, well, where's the light part come into play? That just looks like a Les Paul Custom. Yeah, now do you see it? They're like half the body width of normal. People like to compare them to SGs, so here's a side-by-side profile shot on that. It makes it lighter, because that's pretty much the biggest complaint about Les Paul Customs from this era, is they're heavy. But they also gave them a comfort cut on the back, and you can get slightly better upper fret access because you don't have as much of a heel in your way, because the body's been slimmed down. Here's a good side-by-side comparison for all three. Definitely closer to SG rather than regular Les Paul Custom. So about 1.33 inches on the Custom Lite, and a regular Custom is about 2 inches. And that additional heel area is like 0.15 versus a little bit more than a 1/4 inch. So this is that area that I'm talking about where you feel the difference. It's easier to hug it despite not having like the access carve. And on top of being thinner and having the comfort cuts, you have new tones with a coil split switch. The early Custom Lites had spotlight humbuckers, but then the later ones featured the Bill Lawrence HBL HBR set. So they offered these in a whole bunch of really cool colors. There's also a Floyd Rose version out there. But again, after about 1989, these things were just phased out. Apparently they weren't popular enough to stay in long-time production. However, the 2000s and 2010s era was a very experimental time for Gibson. I mean, we're talking Guitar of the Week series, Guitar of the Month, Goddess, Vegas series, among many of others. They didn't know it at the time, but Henry had like about 5 or 6 years left running the company. They decided to bring them back in the year 2013 as a limited edition run of 250. The first limited edition run was only offered in black. The biggest difference between the 80s version is the fact that it had pearloid inlays on the headstock, but it still had all the cool binding. Same thing is true for the fretboard, except it's now rosewood, and it still featured the mini toggle switch, and those things sold out quickly. So quickly, the next model year, 2014, they came out with some new colors. Now, I don't think these were anywhere near as limited, but in order to not make the people who bought the initial run upset, look at our headstock. It is changed. We still have the multi layers of binding on the headstock, but you've got the SG crown instead of your fancy custom block inlay. But as a trade-off, you were able to choose from 4 different colors. They still offered ebony. They introduced white, a nice wine red, and then the hardest one to find seems to be Tobacco Sunburst, which is why we're documenting this one today. These were not spec'd with flame tops. It's luck of the draw. So this is a particularly nice example. I'm not quite sure if I'm going to be able to sell this thing or not, because it's just such a good example. I'm not saying this is the only one like that, but on top of that, we've got some pretty cool figuring on the back as well as the wood grain. And yes, we still have our coil split switch. It's the same 490R, 498T humbuckers. But then these disappeared until 2016. This is the Mac Daddy of the 2010s era Custom Lite, because a lot of people would take these and just remount the mini toggle switch so they could have something that looks exactly like a Les Paul Custom from the front. And Gibson saw them doing that, so that new 2016 run was limited edition again, but they offered the stock 4 control knob setup. That time they offered them in black and white finishes. So in terms of desirability, it's the original 80s, then it's 2016, then the 2013s, followed up by 2014. Now, can we put an honorable mention into the 2014 Les Plus model? It features the mini toggle switch just like these guys do. It's got that same slim down body style. It has true mother of pearl inlays for our fretboard, but it doesn't share the name, so technically not part of things. nowadays, it's hard to find any of them, let alone the limited edition ones that have the headstock that looks normal. The days of picking these things up for $1,200 are way over, unfortunately, but it's cool to learn about their history anyways. Now, you might be curious, should I buy one of the Gibson USAs or go for an 80s? In my opinion, go full out 80s. These feel like custom shop, whereas these feel like Gibson USA. However, they were both built at the same place, Gibson, Nashville. It really just comes down to having the real mother-of-pearl inlays on your fretboard and it being ebony versus our rosewood. And even if you do have the full-on custom block headstock, it's not mother-of-pearl, it doesn't quite look the same. But both are great guitars, don't discount them. But if the price was the same, it's a no-brainer in my opinion. It's real easy to become a gear snob and be like, only the custom shop is good enough. But trust me, I have an insane amount of Les Pauls in my collection, and I enjoy Gibson USAs just as much as custom shops. Do they feel different? Yes. But that doesn't necessarily make one or the other bad. In fact, having the variety can sometimes be cool. So to learn more about the 2013 run of Custom Lite, let's go ahead and throw this one on the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs. Inside our 2014 Custom Lite, polishing this one up definitely brought out even more figuring, if that's even possible. I really like this spot right here, how it just plays super peekaboo with kind of like almost a bird's eye figuring. Very nice. So now let's look at our pickups. So unfortunately, at one point in time, somebody used a polish that ate through the finish. Now that it's been polished up, it's not as apparent. Be careful what polishes you use on your gold hardware because a lot of them will eat through it. Like this one, I would not suggest. Even though that's what I use for like my general cleaning. I found this Virtuoso premium polish works well for that if you don't have like a dedicated cleaner because this stuff works wonders on guitars anyway. Thankfully, it looks like the cleaner stopped at that point and didn't ruin the bridge pickup. But that's just some friendly looking out advice. So these are just regular pickups, 490R and the 498T in the bridge, so they wouldn't be that hard to replace. However, there is something special about these. They have the gray lead coming out of them. They are a 4-conductor pickup. I'm not going to say that there's not other 4-conductor of this series, it's just a little bit harder to find from this era anyway. Here's our bridge pickup cavity, reads LPCCLT, likely standing for Les Paul Classic Custom Lite. Here we can see that beautiful maple top joining onto our mahogany body. And now our neck pickup, we can see the long neck tenon, but it's labeled VS. That stands for Vintage Sunburst. That's technically what this color is. So you're probably wondering, what's the difference between Vintage Sunburst and Tobacco Sunburst? Vintage Sunburst has a black or very dark border, whereas Tobacco is more of a brown hue. It can actually be kind of difficult to tell the difference between some of them. Full humbucking mode, the bridge reads 13.84 K ohms, 7.75 in the neck, in the middle position just for fun, 4.96. You can come over here and flip it from the down position, which is full on, to the up, which will have our readings. So middle position 2.5, bridge 7, and neck 3.89. So it'll sound single coil-esque. It at least gives you a different tone. As far as our bridge, it's just your regular Nashville style one, and a full weight tailpiece that seems to have suffered the same fate as the neck pickup, done up by Advanced Plating Incorporated. They omitted one of our tone controls, so they just left this as 2 volumes, one for each pickup like normal, and then a master tone. Could I see this model coming back in the future? Maybe, but I doubt they would ever do this again. The reason why Gibson used these mini toggles in the 80s is, you gotta remember this was like really new technology at the time. Nowadays, Gibson typically just goes for the push-pull pots, making these things obsolete, but I guess they were probably just trying to go off in nostalgia for those. Which is cool, I can respect that. Condition-wise, being a vintage Sunburst, the black edges, they show scratches and impressions. It's not perfect, but then you move on to the bursted part and it hides any small scratches. But we do need to talk about something that's very common in this era of Gibson. You see right along where the binding and the body meet, it's common to find these finish cracks. Like there's actually a ledge. It's like the binding is standing proud, and I think that's why the finish tends to chip. Unfortunately, that happens to many of Gibsons from this time frame. So don't necessarily shy away from one, just be careful when you're polishing or if you're picking that you don't accidentally cause the finish to flake even worse. Over here you can see like a defect in the binding too. That's really bad on the Midtown series. And we've got like a small ding over here on the cutaway area. Moving on from our two-piece maple top and mahogany body, we've got the 50s rounded mahogany neck with a rosewood fretboard. 22 medium jumbo style frets, but here's the other thing that people didn't like about the 2014 run. It has the 120th anniversary banner, and if this was just on one or two models, I think people would have liked it, but the problem was every 2014 with an asterisk. Got that. If you clean your guitar using steel wool, that's a perfectly fine way to clean frets and fretboards, but on inlays, be careful when they have wording because you can actually erase it. That's also true on 1974 20th anniversary inlays, so be careful on one of those. So it's 120th anniversary. That's just kind of funny. But that was like that when I bought it. But I like the red streaks in this board after I conditioned it. It's honestly looking pretty good. But remember, these are acrylic block inlays. It's not the real deal stuff. And then keen-eyed viewers might have noticed, hey, where's the fret nibs? Did somebody refret this? No. 2014, they didn't do fret nibs. High performance guitars through 2019 mainly did not get them. 2015 in general did not have them. The nut measures 1.7 inches. That increases to 2.07 by the 12th. First fret neck to 0.86 and 0.96 by the 12th. Here's a look at that neck profile. First fret and 12th fret. Now, when Gibson called these a 50s neck profile, they're talking about the roundedness. This is nowhere near a baseball bat, but it does have a nice full feeling medium profile neck if you're used to custom shop guitars, but it's about as thick as most Gibson USAs go. Moving on to our headstock, we can see our crown kind of makes it like the classic antique series, except we have the multiply headstock binding, and we've got our Gibson logo, gold Grover tuners, and here's a look at our truss rod. It's all looking good. I guess I forgot to mention this, the truss rod covers change on the runs. Here's what they look like for the years. 2014 literally just says custom. I also want to point out the nut. It kind of yellowed with age, but it is original. No lacquer has been disturbed. So if you ever see this textured backplate from I think it's 2014 through 2019-ish, this has built-in shielding capabilities impregnated within it, but unfortunately they don't work that good. So if you're still getting hum, what you need to do is you need to actually ground it off using a wire from here to one of your screws, and then it'll work as intended. They weren't textured for show, they actually had a purpose. Another issue you would sometimes get from these when they were newer is there's static built up in the finish, and if you would rub your hand along it, you could actually hear the static through the pickups. So that's what that grounding off of that ended up helping. I would assume as time goes on, the static would discharge, but who knows. So we've got the Gibson branded pots, all of our typical wiring. Our mini toggle switch actually looks very similar to what they used in the 80s. But I thought it was cool where they routed the output jack. Since the body's so thin, you can actually start to see the maple top get exposed. So it's kind of like a multi-layered wood system. Pretty cool. And then due to the thin body, you actually have to use a rectangular output jack plate instead of our usual square. Then here's another cool thing that I believe this was the first year they used, is the large Strat button style. It was somewhere around this time anyways. It's basically meant to replace a strap lock by being larger than a stock Strat button. Now let's take a look at our cutaway. It's really not that extreme. It's rather shallow, and it doesn't actually cut away the edge too much at all. It's a light comfort cut. We've got a small ding right there, with some light scratches here, other buckle marks. This one looks more like a dip in the finish to me, but then we definitely have some strap wear down here. So not minty, but far from beat up. It's a two-piece back. Surprisingly enough, they did the thin binding in the cutaway, so you can see the maple cap exposed right there. And a lot of times these will get chewed up by gene rivets or whatever does it. This example looks pretty decently clean on the edges. I'm really noticing, though, is just how dark this mahogany color is. Now, obviously, there's a little bit of a stain over top of it, but even if you look at modern-day production, the color of mahogany does make a vast difference. Thought I remembered seeing some light impressions on the neck, but I'm not seeing those again, so just minimal wear. And these came stock with gold Grover tuners. They were not locking, but it's very popular for people to replace those. But here's another thing about 2014 Gibsons. They introduced the 1994 style serial number. So if you try to read this as, hey, it's a 2010, or you put it into a online serial number calculator, it's going to say it's a 2010, but then you also have to ask yourself, what's the 401st day of the year? That doesn't exist. So 2014 through early 2019, it's actually read year, and then the rest is simply a production number. How light is a light? This one's just under 7.5 pounds, 7 pounds, 6 ounces. They typically range between that 7 and 8.5 pound range, though. So they're not that much lighter, but if you've got a bad back, another pound or two will definitely be helpful. So let's go ahead and plug it in and hear how the 2014 version sounds.
There's some nice lead tones out of this neck pickup. Now that we know all about the 2014 Gibson Les Paul Custom Lite, what are my final thoughts on this? This particular one needs a serious setup. I sighted the neck and it looks like it needs to be straightened out a little bit, but the action was not that good.
Hey there, Trogly from the future. Yep, that's exactly what it needed. The neck was too far bowed, so when you tried to lower your action, it'd be buzzing off the very top fret. So when straightening that neck out, it cured that issue, and now it has perfectly fine action. So that's a bit of a relief.
But as far as the tones, yeah, I was plenty impressed with that. It might not be traditional sounds when you have your coil split on, but for the 490R, 498T set, I thought this sounded pretty good. And the fact that it looks beautiful is just an added bonus. Again, I want to emphasize, most of them do not have figured tops. They're typically plain. I've seen a few vintage Sunbursts like this, but not most of them. I really do enjoy this neck profile. It's nice and rounded, and I recorded this the same time as a couple of actual full-on Les Pauls. And I've got to say, this is ridiculously lightweight. It feels nice on the back if you're trying to gig with it. However, at the same time, it kind of starts feeling like a toy, especially because it's a little bit thinner, so it will take a little bit to get used to, so maybe try one if you see one at a store. or if these specs sound appealing to you. You can try buying one online, which is probably where you're going to have to go to find one of these nowadays, almost 10 years after their production. All right, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoy your new guitar knowledge. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care.
If you enjoyed tonight's episode, consider subscribing. I post videos like this every day. And you might even enjoy this next one.